Welcome to our channel. Every Friday and Sunday at 10 p.m. Greenwich Mediterranean Time, we post a new video of a real-life drama told in story format. If you enjoy such content, be sure to tickle the like button and hit subscribe and the bell notification so you never miss out on new stories. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Catherine was a woman of striking yet understated beauty, her physical features reflecting the resilience and grace that defined her character. She stood at a modest height, around 5 feet 4 inches, with a slender yet sturdy build. Her frame, though petite, hinted at the strength and endurance she had developed through years of hard work in her garden and household chores. Her hair was a rich chestnut brown, falling in soft waves that she usually tied back into a practical bun to keep it out of her face while she worked. Strands of silver had begun to weave through her locks, a testament to the years of experience and wisdom she carried with her. With deep, expressive blue eyes, often described as the color of a calm sea just before dusk, she had the natural ability to captivate those she were in conversation with. They were her most striking feature, capable of conveying a wide range of emotions, from the fierce determination that drove her to testify against a ruthless killer to the gentle kindness she showed to her friends and neighbors. On the morning of January 22nd, 1906, Catherine woke up to the soft light of dawn filtering through the thin curtains of her modest cottage in Claremont, a suburban area of the city of Cape Town characterized by its serene environment and close-knit community. The house was a small, single-story cottage made of weathered brick and timber. The roof, slightly worn from years of weather, was covered in terracotta tiles that added a rustic charm. The front yard was enclosed by a white picket fence, slightly chipped but sturdy, which framed a small garden. The garden was a testament to Catherine's love for nature. She had carefully planted rows of vibrant flowers, daisies, marigolds and lavender, which filled the air with a sweet floral scent. The garden also had a small patch of vegetables, including tomatoes and carrots, reflecting her practical side. Inside, the cottage was cozy and functional. The living room, though small, was warm and inviting, with a fireplace that provided much-needed warmth during colder months. Simple wooden furniture adorned the space, with handmade cushions adding a touch of comfort. The walls were adorned with family photographs and a few pieces of local artwork, giving the room a personal touch. The kitchen was the heart of Catherine's home. It had an old-fashioned stove, a wooden table, and shelves lined with jars of homemade preserves. The smell of freshly baked bread often lingered, blending with the aroma of herbs hanging to dry. Catherine's bedroom was equally modest, with a sturdy bed covered in a handmade quilt. A small wooden dresser held her few possessions, including a locket with a picture of her late husband. The room was her sanctuary, a place where she found solace and rest after long days. Claremont was a peaceful suburb, where neighbours knew each other by name and looked out for one another. The sounds of children playing, dogs barking, and the occasional chatter of neighbours were common, creating a lively yet comforting atmosphere. Catherine's home was close to open fields and dense forests, where the rustling of leaves and the songs of birds provided a constant background melody. These natural surroundings were both her escape and her source of inspiration, offering her a sense of peace and connection to the earth. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of the African veldt. As she stepped out of bed, the wooden floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet. She stretched, feeling the familiar pull of her muscles, and glanced at the small clock on her bedside table. It was just past 6 in the morning. The morning routine began with a quick wash using the cool water from the basin, the chill jolting her fully awake. She dressed in her usual day clothes, a simple, sturdy dress suitable for housework and gardening. After breakfast, Catherine donned her wide-brimmed hat and stepped into the bright sunlight. The garden awaited her care, a patchwork of vibrant colours and earthy greens. She spent the next few hours tending to her plants, the soil cool and slightly damp beneath her fingers. The sweet scent of blooming flowers mingled with the more pungent smell of freshly turned earth, creating a fragrant symphony that surrounded her as she worked. As she approached the back of the house, a strange noise caught her attention, a muffled thump followed by the low murmur of voices. Her curiosity piqued. Catherine quietly moved closer to the sound, careful to remain unseen. Peering through a small gap in the fence, she saw them, a man and his accomplices. They were in the backyard of the neighbouring house, a secluded spot shielded from the main road. The scene unfolded in slow motion. A tall man with a cold, calculating demeanour was overseeing the digging of a shallow grave. The men with him moved with grim efficiency, their faces set in stony determination. The air was thick with tension, the oppressive heat of the midday sun amplifying the sinister atmosphere. Catherine's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum in her ears. The metallic scent of sweat and fear hung heavy in the air, mingling with the pungent odour of freshly disturbed earth. She felt a wave of nausea, the bile rising in her throat as the reality of what she was witnessing sunk in. Catherine stumbled back, her mind racing. The sight of the men burying the body had shaken her to the core. She knew she had to act, but fear gripped her tightly. Reporting what she had seen could bring retribution upon her. The man she saw was known to be ruthless. The village had whispered rumours of his dark deeds, but this was the first time Catherine had seen the horrifying truth with her own eyes. For days, Catherine grappled with her conscience. The fear was a constant gnawing presence, but so was ever so agonizingly aware that staying silent could allow this man to continue his reign of terror. Each night she lay awake, the events replaying in her mind, the sight of the grave, the cold determination in this wretched man's eyes, the sense of helplessness that threatened to overwhelm her. Finally, the weight of her knowledge became too much to bear. On the morning she decided to report what she had seen, Catherine woke up with a sense of heavy resolve. The soft light of dawn illuminated her modest bedroom again, casting the same long shadows on the wooden floor as it did on that fateful day. She dressed with meticulous care, choosing a plain but clean dress, and tied her chestnut hair back into a practical bun. Her hands, calloused from years of labour, trembled slightly as she fastened the buttons. Before leaving, she took a moment to stand in her garden, inhaling deeply the scent of blooming lavender and freshly turned soil. The familiar sounds of birds chirping and the rustling of leaves provided a fleeting sense of calm. She knew that once she stepped outside the safety of her home, there would be no turning back. The walk to the police station was a test of Catherine's resolve. The streets of Claremont were just beginning to stir, the early morning light casting a golden hue over the cobblestones. As she walked, she passed by familiar landmarks, the bakery with its mouth-watering aroma of fresh bread, the schoolhouse where children's laughter would soon fill the air, and the town square where merchants were setting up their stalls. Each step was accompanied by a whirlwind of emotions. Fear gripped her heart, its icy fingers squeezing tighter with every passing minute. Doubts crept into her mind. Would anyone believe her? Would she be safe? Yet alongside the fear was a burning sense of justice. The image of Wilhelm Schaefer, a German farmer well known to Catherine, being buried by this man and his accomplice was etched in her memory, a constant reminder of why she needed to speak out. The police station was a small, unassuming building near the edge of town. As Catherine approached, the sounds of Claremont's morning hustle faded into the background, replaced by the more subdued noises of officialdom, the clatter of typewriters, the murmur of voices, and the occasional clang of metal doors. Catherine hesitated at the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. Summoning all her courage, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of ink and paper, a stark contrast to the fresh, earthy scents of her garden. A young officer at the front desk looked up, his expression one of mild curiosity, turning to concern as he noticed her anxious demeanour. "I need to speak with someone about a serious matter," Catherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. The officer, sensing the gravity of her request, led her to a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with wooden panels, giving the space a sombre atmosphere. As she sat down, the wooden chair creaked under her weight. The officer introduced himself as Detective Harris, a man in his mid-40s with a kind but serious expression. "Please, tell me what you've seen," Harris said, his tone gentle but probing. Catherine took a deep breath, the words catching in her throat. As she began to recount the events, her voice wavered, but she pressed on. She described the scene in vivid detail, the sight of this man and his accomplice burying Schaefer's body, the chilling words exchanged, and the unmistakable smell of lime mingling with the fresh earth. As a side note, it would later turn out that Wilhelm Schaefer would be this man's last victim. As she spoke, Detective Harris listened intently, his expression shifting from curiosity to grim determination. He asked questions, probing for more details, and Catherine answered as best as she could. The process was exhausting, each memory dragging her back to that day, but she persevered. Throughout the interview, Catherine's emotions were a turbulent mix. Relief washed over her as she finally unburdened herself of the terrible secret she had been carrying. Yet fear lingered, a constant undercurrent. What would happen now? Would this man find out she had spoken? Detective Harris treated her with kindness and respect, acknowledging the courage it took to come forward. "You've done the right thing," he assured her. "We will do everything we can to ensure your safety." Despite his reassurances, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The villagers she encountered on her way home were a blur of indifferent faces. Some nodded in greeting, unaware of the internal battle she was fighting. She wondered how they would react if they knew the truth. The days following her meeting with Detective Harris were a blur of anxiety and uncertainty. Catherine was plagued by nightmares, the vivid memories of that fateful day haunting her sleep. However, the village was divided. Some saw her as a hero, while others feared the repercussions of her actions. On the morning she was to make her appearance in court, Catherine woke up with a sense of dread and determination drowning all thoughts. She dressed carefully, choosing a modest dress that reflected her humble but resilient nature. Her hands shook slightly as she tied her hair back, but she forced herself to focus. Today she would face Pierre Basson in court and recount the horrors she had witnessed. The walk to the courthouse was sombre. The streets of Claremont were bustling with morning activity, but to Catherine everything felt distant and surreal. She passed by familiar shops and faces, but today she felt like an outsider in her own community. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery, normally a source of joy, barely registered in her mind. Each step was heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. Entering the courthouse, Catherine was met with a flurry of activity. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and ink, a stark contrast to the fresh air outside. She was guided to a small waiting room where she was to wait until called to testify. The room was dimly lit, with worn wooden furniture and walls lined with legal books. The ticking of a clock on the wall was the only sound, each second dragging on interminably. Finally, the moment came. A court officer led Catherine to the courtroom, where she would face Basson and recount her story. The courtroom was a stark, formal space. Wooden benches filled with spectators lined the room, the faces of the villagers a mix of curiosity, skepticism and support. The judge's bench stood at the front, flanked by the prosecution and defense tables. The smell of polished wood and the faint aroma of ink filled the air, a combination of the old and the new. As Catherine took her place at the witness stand, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she lifted her chin, determined to see this through. Catherine took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice, though trembling at first, grew steadier as she recounted the events she had witnessed. She described the sight of Basson and his accomplice Tobias Lau burying Wilhelm Schaefer, the chilling words exchanged, and the unmistakable smell of lime and earth. Each detail she provided painted a vivid picture of the horror she had seen. As she spoke, the courtroom was silent, the audience hanging on her every word. The prosecution listened intently, their expressions grave. The defense, in contrast, eyed her with skepticism, ready to pounce on any perceived inconsistencies. Catherine's emotions were a turbulent mix. Fear gnawed at her, but alongside it was a fierce determination. The memory of Schaefer's death drove her forward, giving her the strength to continue. The reactions in the courtroom were varied. Some spectators looked at her with sympathy and admiration, recognizing the courage it took to come forward. Others, particularly those aligned with Basson, regarded her with suspicion and disdain. Whispers and murmurs filled the room as she testified, a background noise that underscored the tension. Detective Harris, seated near the prosecution, gave her a small nod of encouragement every now and then, a silent reminder that she was not alone in this. Finally, when her testimony concluded, Catherine felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The judge dismissed her, and she was escorted out of the courtroom. The walk back home felt surreal, the events of the day replaying in her mind. The streets of Claremont, so familiar and comforting, now seemed alien. The friendly faces she passed felt distant, their greetings hollow. As she approached her home, the sight of her garden brought a sense of relief. The familiar smells of flowers and earth, the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves were a balm to her frayed nerves. Catherine entered her home, closing the door behind her with a sense of finality. She sat down in her living room, the quiet of her surroundings a stark contrast to the chaos of the courtroom. The weight of what she had done settled over her, a mix of relief and lingering fear. She had taken a stand for justice, and while the road ahead was uncertain, she knew she had done the right thing. After the trial, Catherine returned to her quiet life, but the experience had changed her. The village looked at her with a mix of respect and fear, a constant reminder of the price of courage. She found solace in her garden, the familiar sights and smells providing a comforting backdrop as she slowly healed from the ordeal. The memory of that day never fully left her, but Catherine carried on, knowing that her actions had helped bring a killer to justice. The garden flourished under her care, a symbol of resilience and the enduring power of truth. Each flower that bloomed was a reminder that even in the face of darkness there is always hope. Pierre Basson, a man shrouded in infamy as perhaps South Africa's first mass murderer. It was 1906 when the courts, in a twist of justice both eerie and unsettling, finally passed judgment on him. Basson, accused posthumously, had allegedly taken the lives of 8 or 9 souls, among them his own brother Jasper. The chilling details emerged, with each tragic death linked to an insurance payout, each ending with Basson as the sole beneficiary. As the long arm of the law closed its grip, Basson, facing the spectre of justice, chose his own fate. In a grim finale to his dark saga, he turned a gun on himself, ending his life as abruptly as he had taken others, yet the shadows of his deeds cast wide. Tobias Lew, said to be his accomplice, faced the courts but slipped through the grasp of conviction, the evidence not enough to seal his guilt. Even Basson's own mother, caught in the web of suspicion, tasted the bitter sting of accusation before the truth set her free. Through the turmoil and tragedy, the echoes of the Basson case resonated far and wide, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of Cape Town's history. In the words preserved by Shriner's letters, the legacy of Pierre Basson lingered, a haunting reminder of darkness lurking beneath the veneer of everyday life.